Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Sakamoto, Interim Director of Programming and Director of Asian and Asian American Arts and Culture at the UMass Amherst Fine Arts Center. We welcome you to the second event in our Art and Conversation series entitled Bodies at Risk, featuring historical reflection, innovative dialogue, and previews of new work by the performance companies founded by our featured guests tonight, Jawole Willa Zollar, founding artistic director and chief visioning partner of Urban Bushwoman, and Ananya Chatterjea, founder and artistic director of Ananya Dance Theater. They are joined tonight by two wonderful moderators, Swati Shah, associate professor of gender and sexuality studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Deborah Goff, performer, artist, and assistant professor of modern and contemporary dance at Hampshire College. We begin our event by acknowledging that the University of Massachusetts Amherst occupies Nonotuk land, and we acknowledge our neighboring indigenous nations, the Nipmuc and Wampanoag to the east, the Mohegan and Pequot to the south, the Mohican to the west, and the Abenaki to the north. Jawole and Swati come to us tonight from one corner of the traditional lands of Lenapehoking, known colloquially as Brooklyn, New York. Ananya is in Minnesota Makoche, the unceded territories of the Dakota Oyate, otherwise known as Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Deborah comes to us tonight from Pocumtuck and Nipmuc lands in what is otherwise known as Holyoke, Massachusetts. Tonight's event is the second presentation of Bodies at Risk, a series of creative conversations between primarily Black, Indigenous, and persons of color performing artists, educators, activists, and other experts working to shift American society's understanding of the racialized body and social justice. These events aim to engage, move, and surprise audiences through artistic demonstration, intellectual curiosity, and courageous vision. This is also the second program co-presented as part of the 27th season of the Fine Arts Center's Asian and Asian American Arts and Culture program. Please also join us next Monday, October 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern for our next Bodies at Risk event with 2020 MacArthur Genius Grant winner, Native American playwright Larissa Fasthorse, in creative conversation with groundbreaking neuroscientist, activist, and former ballet dancer, Eric Jarvis. We will try and get to as many of your questions as possible this evening, so make sure you add them in the comment fields on both YouTube and Facebook. The UMass Fine Arts Center is supported by the New England Foundation for the Arts through the New England Arts Resilience Fund, part of the United States Regional Arts Resilience Fund, an initiative of the U.S. Regional Arts Organizations and the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, with major funding from the Federal CARES Act from the National Endowment for the Arts. Also, even during these challenging times, the Fine Arts Center remains committed to connecting our audiences to a wide range of voices and perspectives through world-class performances, exhibitions, and educational programs. Now more than ever, we rely on you, our donors, to make this work happen. Please consider making a gift, if you're able, at fineartscenter.com/giving. I'm honored now to introduce our moderators for the evening, Swati Shah and Deborah Goff.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to lead us into this very special conversation by introducing our guests of honor, Jawole Willa Zollar and Ananya Chatterjea, who both epitomize the power of intersecting artistic, community, social justice, and scholarly practices. And by this, I refer to the ways their individual trajectories traverse these multiple modes of inquiry, and as well as we'll discuss tonight, the ways the trajectories themselves cross to bring their practices into relationship. So a little bit about them, which of course these bios could not hold all that they've done and accomplished. But a native of Kansas City, Missouri, Jawole Willa Zollar earned her BA in dance from the University of Missouri at Kansas City and her MFA in dance from Florida State University. In 1984, Jawole founded Urban Bushwoman, UBW, as a performance ensemble dedicated to cultural expression as a catalyst for social change. She's created over 34 works for UBW, as well as for the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater and others. Her collaborations include Compagnie Jantbi from Senegal and Nora Chipamire. Her company has toured 5 continents and was selected as one of 3 US dance companies to inaugurate a cultural diplomacy program for the State Department in 2010. Jawole founded the Urban Bushwoman Summer Leadership Institute and currently holds the position of the Nancy Smith Fitcher Professor of Dance and Robert O. Lawton Distinguished Professor at Florida State University. She's received numerous prestigious awards, including a United States Artists Win Fellowship, Guggenheim Fellowship, Doris Duke Performing Arts Award, Dance Magazine Award, honorary degrees from Tufts University and Rutgers University, and recently the Bessie Lifetime Achievement in Dance Award. Ananya Chatterjea works as a choreographer, dancer, and thinker, bringing together contemporary dance, social justice choreography, and a philosophy of #OccupyDance. She is founding artistic director of Ananya Dance Theater, a Twin Cities-based professional dance company of women, artists of color, and co-founder of the Shangram Institute for Performance and Social Justice. Chatterjea's company creations entitled People-Powered Dances of Transformation proceed through onstage and participatory performances in non-traditional spaces where audiences become co-creators of movement exploration. She's received numerous major awards herself, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, McKnight Fellowship, Joyce Foundation Award, the Dance USA Artist Fellowship as well. Ananya is currently creating Dastak, a dance theater work exploring borders, boundaries, home, and belonging, with a planned performance at UMass in 2022. Her work has toured nationally and internationally, including venues in Bangladesh, Palestine, India, Ethiopia, here in the United States, in Maui, and in Washington, D.C. Ananya is professor of dance at the University of Minnesota, is author of Budding Out, Reading Resistance Choreographies Through Works by Jawole Zollar and Chandralekha. Her second book, Heat and Alterity in Contemporary Dance, South-South Choreographies, being published by Palgrave Macmillan, reframes contemporary dance from the perspective of choreographers from the Global South.
Hello, everyone. So it is my great honor to kick us off. And I said this in our meeting when we were talking about this event, and I will say it again today. I really feel that I've taken a correct turn in life somewhere. I won't call it a right turn, because in my case, it would be a left turn. But I took a correct left turn into this wonderful moment where I'm moderating this conversation with two artists whose work I've truly been a deep and respectful fan of since the early 90s, when I was a college student and part of the social movements that were very present in our lives at the time. I was involved in HIV/AIDS organizing, queer organizing, anti-racist organizing, and I was very much engaged with social movements in Great Britain and other places because of people around me were, and both of you were in those spaces. So it's incredible to me to get to moderate a conversation with people whose work has been so meaningful to me for so long. And I do regret that, I think there are both silver linings and also obviously great challenges with this moment. And one of the challenges for an event like this is our wonderful audience that doesn't get to see an electrifying performance from your two companies. And I know that one of the reasons I'm sort of breathless right now with excitement is I've actually gotten to experience the kind of life-giving, radical, critical, beautiful work that both of you make. So in that spirit, I wonder if you could do the silver lining part of this format, which is actually, our audience getting to hear from you directly about your own journeys and kind of how you made the institutions that you made, and I'm also thinking about some of the stuff that we talked about earlier about how embedded these projects have been and your politics and your love of all kinds of people. So if you could kind of lead us into that path, and I won't ask, whoever feels like speaking first, please. I would look forward to hearing from both of you. Ananya, do you want to? Jawole, I'm not sure who.
Yeah,
Jawole, please.
I'll go. Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm honored to be invited to be part of this, and I'm always honored to be in the space, virtual or real, with Ananya. So this is quite a joy for this moment. When I think back on my journey, I realized that what happened with Urban Bushwomen, and I'll go back a little bit, but what happened with Urban Bushwomen was an integration of all of my selves. So I'm going to talk about that I grew up learning to dance in, by picking up things in the neighborhood, drill teams, block parties, all those kinds of things that were informal ways of dancing. And then when I came into my community dance training, it was I became an entertainer. I was performing as a part of the Kitty Act with my sister, and it was the reviews that were done for Black audiences. So there was a comic MC, often what was called a female impersonator, a flash act like the Nicholas Brothers, a tap dance, a stripper or exotic dancer, which I was just completely just blown away by. And then my sister and I were part of the Kitty Act. And so I grew up in that environment of just dancing from the love and from this idea of that you have a style, you have an expression, and you bring that to the audience. And I got to college and started to realize that I could major in dance. And at the same time, when I was in college, a lot of myself was fragmented. So here was my political education study over here. Here was my feminist groups over here. Here was my spiritual community over here. And here was my dance, and it was really, really fragmented. When I came to New York in 1980 and formed Urban Bush Women, I realized that there was something about this vision that it was about bringing your whole self, the whole self. And in my journey, a lot of my study had been what we now call anti-racism work. It wasn't called that then. My first class was with a man named Dr. William R. Jones, who founded the Black Studies Department at Florida State when I was a grad student. And he let me sit in on his class, Analysis of Racism. And I was like, Analysis of Racism? You can really analyze this? Because the only thing I knew was what I felt and experienced. And I didn't know and understand till his class that it was systemic, systematic, and intentional. And that began a journey of a quest for how all of these things would come together in my own work. So Urban Bush Women, at its core, is that how do we bring both that political activism, the stories that we want to tell about the human condition, that could be beauty, they could be that you see a beautiful sunset, as in a section of Walking with Pearl. It's describing her seeing the sunset, where you want to confront the kinds of issues like in womb wars, where women's wombs are wanting to be or trying to be controlled by other people. So I just thought, but I'm bringing all of my parts together. So I don't have to say this is over here and this is over there, but all of those things are together through the lens of a Black woman who grew up in this segregation in Kansas City, Missouri, and who's trying to figure things out in a way that creates the deepest experience for the audience, a complex experience. And at the same time, an experience where the intellectual part of the work is clear, the spiritual, the emotional, the psychological, the political, all of those things are there existing together, and it's not either or.
Thank you so much.
I have to say, Swati, I'm really excited to be in this conversation because I feel like I'm drawing different threads from my life together. Jawole, I met when I came early to this country as a grad student, and I just fell in love with the work of Urban Bush Women, and I proceeded to write my dissertation about it. It was really amazing to be introduced to how powerful dance can be through Jawole's work. And Swati, I had these many years when we connected at this progressive platform, Desh Pardesh. I want to hold that up because that was a brilliant moment when I understood that South Asian organizing could be at the same time anti-racist, anti-homophobic, anti-sexist, working around class issues, labor issues. It was a powerful forum, and those conversations really were important and transformative for me. Deb, hi, I'm so happy. I hope that we can build more relationships from now on. I want to say that in my training in Kolkata, my growing up in Kolkata, a particular part of India which had a long history of left front government was crucial to my understanding that dance had to be revolutionary. I was training in both classical work and dancing with choreographers like Shambhu Bhattacharya, who along with singer-songwriter Hemango Bishwas, was making songs such as were making pieces such as Shankhochil. Shankhochil is the work through the metaphor of a seagull to criticize or to critique the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he talks of a Bidroho Ban, a revolutionary wave that is going to connect all of Africa, all of Asia, and all of the South America, and bring us towards this revolution, towards justice. So I feel like this notion of coalition building was crucial, was embedded in me early on. It was not part of the classical dance world, which I loved the formal organization of the body that it gave me, but it didn't move my heart in the same way. And I really felt through my growing years that, inside my guru studio, this beautiful, idealized, romantic, heterosexual love. And just outside at the bus stop, I would leave the studio, walk to the bus stop, and there were these women's group doing street theater about, dowry deaths and other kinds of issues, a literacy campaign, which were very strong at that time. So I feel like bringing those together brought me to where I am today. And those of us who study Indian dance know that we didn't, at least in my generation, we did not study choreography. It is much later on when I wanted to make dance, but when I was committed to social justice, that I realized how to choreograph. I learned to make dances because of my commitment. I learned to create a mosaic of stories and who to foreground, when and how to stand, how to create ensemble work without taking other people's stories, how to understand lighting design, which is still not even for all bodies, right? So some people have to stand here, some people have to stand there, how costume colors looked on different skin tones. So all of that together, I have learned to choreograph through my time in organizing. And I do think dance is a primary mode of organizing, of learning to share breath and rhythm without running into each other. I think it's brilliant training for inaugurating the new world that is waiting to be born.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I am so moved. I mean, yeah, I too am sort of overwhelmed by the reality that even despite virtual realities here, to be in both of your presences and to hear that synopsis of beginning points. So thank you so much for that. I'm struck by this through line of connectivity and or integration, the pulling together of multiple threads has been so vivid for me in thinking about this, coming to this moment this evening, and then in hearing it from both of you. I wonder, I think the other thing that has been really vibrant for me that I mentioned to you both before is this question about the intersections of your practices that I mentioned in the introduction. And I wonder if you can talk a bit about, like, one of my own interests is in the ways artists sometimes step forward to provide various kinds of support, to build support networks, to be part of support networks of other artists. And I think this idea of Ananya's dissertation being really rooted in Jawole's work, and I'm sure feeding your own artistic practice. And then we talked about Ananya's presence in the choreography, the center of UBW. And so can you talk a little bit about, from the origin story, like, how have your paths intersected and where do you find yourself now?
Jawole, do you want to begin?
You know, it's when Ananya walked into the room, when I first met her, I could see the power in this person. And I could see the ways that she was asking questions and the kinds of observations that she was making were, you know, I just knew this was a profound thing. I'm always really intimidated in these kind of formats, and I tell you why. I think of dance being my first language. I think it's the place where I'm articulate. I think words I'm always struggling with because the thoughts, emotions that I feel, I feel like I never get them as precisely in words as I do when I'm choreographing and moving. And what I loved is that a lot of what Ananya gave me was language, to be able to articulate certain parts of how these intersections were happening. I would read her book, or she was like, oh wow, yeah, now I do see that now. But for me, it's lived and breathing in a certain kind of way, and I know the juiciness of those intersections, and I know where there's the intentionality and the heart and the fight and the fierceness of those intersections. It is almost like digesting the food, and that it is the food. So I'm always grateful for these beautiful writers and scholars that are able to bring a way of seeing that I think sometimes I know, feel, can move through, but every time when I try to write the words down or speak the words, they never feel as full. So thank you all.
I remember being in the room when Jawole was choreographing Bati moves. I think it's an all-time classic, right? And of course, I don't know ballet, but she was saying, okay, these chaîné turns, but do this. I was like, my goodness, I saw her actually craft subversion by taking a movement and shifting it. And it was from inside. And I learned something about how resistance is both from the outside and from the inside. So I love that moment. And I studied the work for so long, these intersections inside Jawole's work and what I was looking for to learn so much. But I also must hold up my mentor, my professor and advisor, Dr. Brenda Dixon Gottschalk, who prepared me, who taught me to
Yes.
live. And one of the foremost dance scholars in this country, she introduced me to the notion of transnational feminism. And so I'm always surprised when people are pretending to be what they're not to get something, because we can be who we are and support our families. We can. So I loved being able to really look at Jawole's work, see the craft, see what she was saying about the performance, the details, and really understand how powerful dance can be. And then when Jawole introduced me or invited me to be part of the Choreographic Center initiative, I was so honored. I am so honored. And part of that, Jawole helped me to be to negotiate a residency at Mansi.
Mm-hmm.
I have never been supported in that way before. It was really something to see how much support one can have in the creative process. And Jawole, if you want to say something about that, great. Otherwise, I will.
Yeah, I want to go back even further. The first time I saw your work, because I met you as someone who was writing their dissertation and who was observing, and then I saw your work. And so that power that I felt from you in the room, I saw manifest in movement and intention. And I saw this fierceness and at the same time this vulnerability. And I think it was in Minneapolis. Was it maybe it was an APAT? No, Dance USA.
Oh, Dance USA.
It was a Dance USA, and I saw the work, and I was like, Ananya. And, when I see someone with a vision, I get very excited. Because lots of people can learn to choreograph, but when you have a vision, which means you're bringing something from your life and your experiences into a unique set of ways of seeing and ways for then the audience to experience that for me really blew me away. So that I can still see the room where I saw the work for the first time. And so when something like that leaves that deep impression, I know it's basically saying, pay attention. This is not just something that's going to wash over you, a million things that you've seen. This is meaning something, so pay attention. So when we formed the Choreographic Center, when we made that Choreographic Center initiative, I knew it was one of the artists that I had to bring support to. And every artist should have those opportunities to have the kind of support that is offered at Mansi. Every artist should have that support. So whatever I can do to in the field to make that available, I'm going to do it.
Jawole, Zollar are always making paradigm shifts. I think this is a moment to show one of the things that Jawole's the choreographic center supported was this new work, Dastak. And because we couldn't premiere it out, we did actually rehearse it outside in the public parks. And, this is a city where George Floyd was murdered, where the uprising happened. And then the city, the crisis of affordable housing broke open, and people were in parks, unhoused sanctuaries were set up in parks. So we rehearsed it outside, and we made films of it. So this is of the second act, this film, and it's premiering tonight. It is supported by the Urban Bush Women Choreographic Center Initiative. Let's see it.
Ancestors. Praying, playing, flowing, opening, receiving, offering. 108 sun salutations, 108 mudras, 108 beads, 108 braids, 108 breaths, 108 birds, 108 flowers, 108 memories, 108 gone, 108 saris, 108 goddesses, 108 prophecies, 108 waves, 108 teardrops, 108 songs, 108 moons, 108 kisses, 108 birds, 108 candles, 108 colors, 108 seashells, 108 souls soaring, 108 open hearts, 108 open arms, 108 prayers. Reaching for each other, for home, for help, for love. Wiping tears, grasping, opening arms, clearing, wiping away, wiping off, praying, victory. Flood, fly, sing, sacrifice, walk on water, love.
Really beautiful, really beautiful. And you know, seeing it develop in the studio in Tallahassee, and then getting to see this film, it's just it's joyful. It's just joyful to see, to come to that journey. And you know, and it occurs to me, you know, this is coming out of UMass Amherst. You know, and earlier I was talking about the kind of articulation of dance, and realizing that it was one of the few Black studies departments across the United States, Black studies or African American studies, that included dance. Most didn't, still don't include dance as a part of the canon of study and looking at African American studies. And when I see the embodiment, and when I see the ways that we are able to say without saying, I just call out to everyone that it's a missed opportunity to understand how a culture moves and transforms, particularly myself coming out of the Black arts movement, moves and transforms and pushes a movement, goes in the flow of a movement, and you know, works with a movement.
Yes, absolutely, Jawole.
It's so powerful, this articulation, the ways that, I don't know, choreography can be defined in so many ways. And sometimes it seems to be relegated to clever ordering. And yet, just in the course of this conversation, I've heard you talk about choreography. Well, some of it is my interpreting. You talking about choreography as a practice of attention and care in a lot of ways. A way of crafting subvergence, I heard you say, Ananya, a space of integration of selves, bringing one's a uniqueness of one's life and perspective forward, and that unique way of seeing. And those two feel like potentially ways of describing various kinds of organizing and witnessing. And so the idea of choreography holding that and not just a way of showing oneself and ordering that in a way that's clever in order to be seen is really powerful for me and was really evident in what you shared. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to just quickly hold up two people because I'm thinking a lot about this moment. Reminds me of June Jordan. Notion of freedom is indivisible, and either we are fighting for freedom or you're fighting for your self-interest and I'm fighting for mine. And also this amazing younger Black activist, Prentice Hemphill, who talks about street somatics. I just love their work. They talk, so somatics, which is taught sometimes inside dance academia, as it's sort of a very white field inside dance academia, but really they're bringing it to the streets, to what we need, embodied knowledge, what kinds of embodied knowledge we need when we are on the streets protesting, what we need to do to ground ourselves, reframe our mind so we can be present, so our nervous systems can still integrate to the present moment. And as dancers, we already knew that.
So can I ask, a question that we talked about a little bit when we met earlier, and that just really has come to the fore for me in hearing both of you can present your origin stories and that amazing piece that you just shared. Ananya, thank you so much. And I promise I'm not making this about myself, but I'm sort of using myself as a context person. Perhaps other people who are listening to and watching this conversation can relate to this. But I know that as somebody who is not a dancer and is not an artist in a formal sense, right? I do make art myself, but I'm not showing it publicly or selling it or asking people to come and, if I actually tried to sell tickets for somebody watching me dance, I think I would probably get sued by the first person. So as somebody who is not an artist in that way, I know that a lot of the art that I have been exposed to in my life has been through movement spaces. And the movement spaces that I've been in were not engaged with really serious art making as well. And I wouldn't have come across either of you had I not been involved in the kind of political struggles that I was involved with, right? And Ananya, you mentioned Dish Pradesh. There were any number of queer and feminist and anti-racist spaces where I would have either heard about urban bush women performing or actually gotten to see you perform there. And I can't help but think that, that the time when I came to know about your work, which was in the early 90s, was also politically a very different moment than it is today. And, and I don't for a moment think that a collaboration like yours wouldn't be possible today. I think it absolutely would be. And there's evidence of collaborations like yours around us, fortunately. But I also think that the terms of those collaborations would be different. And I wonder if you could talk about your political journeys a little bit, because something that's really striking me here, and that I'm, one of the ways that I'm connecting to this conversation is, for me, my exposure to dance has only been through these radical movements. And so then the kind of high art, very formalistic, this idea of European culture that's encompassed in a certain version of ballet or something. I mean, I think there are people who are trying to undermine that as well, but that's not that's not how I connected to this. I connected to this through these movement spaces. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that context for both of your work.
There's a term that was used in my community when I grew up, whereas they would say, "Oh, he's a race man," or "She's a race woman," and it meant that you felt a responsibility and a connection to be part of how your race, as race was understood and defined, could be uplifted. That was the term, and each one teach one. These are things that I heard all the time growing up within my community. And they were messages about that it's not okay for just some of us to do better. It's about how do that the community has to do better, and how you can look at that community as family or concentric circles, but how do we do that? So that's been a driving force, for me, is understanding that I am part of something that is larger and is tiny. And how do I as a Black woman who has something to say, and at the same time isn't just about it's me, that knows that the root of it comes from the connection of my community. And if I'm not tied to that, if I'm not connected to that in some kind of deep spiritual ancestral way, I'm not going to be able to rise. I'm not going to be able to rise. So at the heart of the political part of me is that idea, oh, you're a race man, you're a race woman. And that doesn't mean that you only see the upliftment of your own particular group. The analysis at that time was, particularly to the, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. But it's the thing that informed me to bring a bigger and larger analysis to the work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that being in Kolkata, growing up in Kolkata, this one experience of being stuck in long traffic jams, because there were forever people, these political processions, sometimes they were posturing, but people were always protesting. And it taught me about the importance of ensemble choreography. That many people moving across place, blocking traffic for hours, through public spaces was an important way to learn. And I think that because I learned about solidarity early on through the dances I was working with. And, I remember Namtar Chilo John Henry, a translation of Harry Belafonte's rendition of the Ballad of John Henry. So these were things that were part of the repertoire. And actually, Swati, the South Asian dance world, the classical dance world was difficult. It was difficult in terms of class, absolutely difficult in terms of class. It really drove me really insane because I couldn't figure out how to make an entry. Even though I think I was a good enough dancer. Gender was horrendous and caste was horrendous. So I feel like there are ways in which we can look at the practice, but the ways in which it was practiced and all the violences that accrued around it really made it a difficult practice for me. So I had to find a way to separate some things out and see where my heart was going. And thank goodness I encountered people like the transnational feminists, like June Jordan, like, Chandra Mohanty, talking about transnational feminism as a way to find heart-centered dancing, find that power of the rhythm, which is already part of my training. I just have to deflect it to a different way. So, and I think today's, I think so much about the resonances between the powerful Black Lives Matter movement and the gathering steam Dalit Lives Matter movement. And these are so essential for us to stand behind as dancers. And I am really learning from the way in which this kind of organizing is happening.
As you said that, Ananya, one of the things is I love watching people move in the streets. And I remember in the 90s, and I was looking at how they were dancing, the young people were dancing in LA. And I remember I was on an NEA panel and I turned to somebody, I said, LA's gonna blow. Look at how they're dancing. They're doing war dances. It's in their body. LA's gonna, that energy is there. And I think that's the part that has been missed about the study of dance, particularly in African or African-American studies or Black studies, is that you can see it coming. You can see what's going on in the streets by the way people are dancing. They're calling up the energy or calling it out, however you want to think about it. It's there. And that's what, for me, politically and spiritually was important to tap into in terms of urban bushwomen. And then to tap into this next generation and support how each generation does that, because it won't look like my generation.
And I'm reminded of the end of Hand's singing song, where Jawole has this beautiful, in the last section on the Black hand side, right? And the people at the crossing, and Jawole does this brilliant monologue and the energy of people coming forward. It's a brilliant piece.
I forgot about that, and I'm gonna go back and look that up.
Well, you keep talking about the way that what you're describing of this next generation actually plays out for you in this organization that you built, right? Because there's this energy that can be felt if you're paying attention on the street, and then there's the way for those of us who have access to institutions who, again, that subversive bodies moment of like going in and wedging space in institutional structures in order to make way for other people. And I see that there are many situations that it seems that you've done that with, both with Summer Leadership Institute and the Choreographic Center initiative, and also in the ways that you've opened space for a new generation of leadership in the company. Can you talk about that? And I know you have a video to share as well.
Sure. I mean, it goes back to each one, teach one. Each one, you know, to be part of that. There's a song, I don't want nobody stumbling after me, which means that I have to my work is to create the path as clear as it can be. Now, they'll have their own stumbles, each generation, but my responsibility is to make a path as I do my work. And so this video is the work of the two new artistic directors, co-artistic directors of Urban Bushwomen, Shannon Judson Johnson and Samantha Spees. And it was made right after COVID, the lockdowns hit, and it was made in relationship with Junebug Productions in New Orleans. And this was their work. And when I saw this, particularly after having done another work of this next generation of leaders, hair, and other stories, but when I saw this work, I began to really see this larger vision that they had. And again, when I see vision, I get excited. So this is the work they made, and it's called Waiting in the Wobble. And it was just right after the pandemic shut everything down.
That's great. And as we shift into watching this, I invite our audience to add questions that you'd like to share with us in the comments as you're watching. And so we can come back to, after the video, to your questions. That would be great.
And then the people came back to a space that was calm, centered, and full of possibility. And then the people came back to a space that was calm, centered, and full of possibility. Gather with your folk, that's the medicine. Take your lips to the wind and sing your songs. High to the mountaintops, dance your prayers, open your heart to the sky, hands stretched wide. Wide-eyed, brilliant, fierce, and mighty people line up behind you, who teach you each moment how to fly. She said, listen. I said, say, yeah. She done seen it all. The breakage, the fall. They ain't ever left us. She just asked us to listen. Sit on your stool. We come from Afro-futurists. We come from Afro-optimists. We come from Afro-futurists. We come from Afro-optimists. We come from a relationship with nature and Insamanfo, the ancestors. We do not embrace the vision of the world coming to an end. We dream. We see new possibility. We pray in action-oriented prayer. We are the temple, a walking altar. We are Mother Earth and she is us. Listen.
And still resilient, we still sing songs of freedom, for we know the medicine that it brings. We dance, we paint, we rest, we pray, for we know the medicine that it brings. We mourn, we laugh, we are silent, we share, struggle, we zoom, we breathe, for we know the medicine that it brings. We witness, we testify, we find new ways, we remember old ones, we remember, we go back, we change, we love, we just be, we miss, we long, we carry together, we carry on, for we know the medicine that it brings. The cure is within you. Us, we here now to heal now. We here now to heal now. We here now to heal now. Heal now. Heal now.
The people were touched, so they touched themselves, they laughed, they rested, they invested, they strategized, they cried, they mourned, they birthed, they saved, they played, they made, they forgave, they began again and again and again. They began again and again. And then the people came back to a space that was calm, centered, and full of possibility.
Wow.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
What an incredible promise of what awaits us on the other side of this. My goodness. Wow.
As I was listening to today to a podcast, this Eddie Glaude talking about James Baldwin and the work, and the question of optimism and hope. You know, and it's that very famous quote of James Baldwin, which I can't remember the whole thing, but I cannot afford to be a pessimist. That whole, it's, I've got, my people would not have made it. They would not have made it under the worst circumstances. And when I think about the people that walked to freedom, how long that walk is, you have to see hope. You have to see something else on the other end. You have to see a better way. You have to vision that. You have to future that in your mind.
I love that you use future as a verb, as something we do. And I 100% agree with you. I really get upset when I see this sort of notion of hopelessness. Hope is not a thing. It's a practice. You do that practice every day. so that you can pay tribute to those who are struggling so hard and who are marginalized every day. Hope is not something we can, it's a fragile practice, but it's something we must hold on to at every cost.
So I know that questions are coming in, and I want to take the privilege of being one of the moderators to ask a question now, which is, that gorgeous line in the piece that you just shared. We sing songs of freedom, for we know the medicine that it brings. And I was just thinking about how I don't know, there is a whole world of dance outside of these movement spaces. I have no idea what it is because I've never accessed it. But as dancers, I wonder, your politics and your heart and your spirit are all in this amazing practice. But then you also deal with the kind of the mainstream dance world, right? The very, spaces like Jacob's Pillow and the kind of federally funded dance. And, you have to make your work happen by dealing with these institutions so that you can make this beautiful bubble for people like me, where all I do is experience dance as a radical practice. Can you comment on that a little bit? Because every time, whenever I think about dance, I think, gosh, my world is so skewed because, dance, painting, art. I think of all art as radical practices, and of course, there's a whole other apparatus out there that doesn't see it that way.
Ananya and I know, we have a little bit of a debate about this, but she knows that I love the dancing body, the moving body. Ballet, if a body is in motion, I'm like this. I'm excited by it. What I don't like, what I hate, what I detest is how one form has been made to have a hierarchy over other forms. That I hate, and that's what we're in the process, I think, of tearing down. But the human body in motion, people in motion, the form for me, I have an ability to pretty much love, different genres, postmodern ballet, whatever, in the streets, because I'm just infatuated with how people move.
Wow, thank you.
Yes, Jawole is really amazing about this, and she's always challenging us actually to really find that ability to look at dance and appreciate it. I have to say, I struggle. I feel that so often I see dance that is, cosmeticized, and so often dance that is used to reinforce, hierarchies, particularly of caste and gender. Mm-hmm. And I can't take that. I have to separate myself from that work. And this is why I'm not an Odissi dancer right now. This was my training of many, many, many years. That's not what I
I'm thinking about Pearl Cleage wrote a book or a poem a few years back. It was called Mad at Miles, if anybody knows it. And in the poem, she talks about learning about how abusive Miles Davis was to women. She was going to scratch all his CDs and burn them. And for whatever reasons, I think maybe the complication of my parents' relationship, I'm able to see the work. I'm able to see the art and all the complexities that come out of it. It's the hierarchy, and that is saying that this one form, which pretty much ballet has been said, this is more important. When the white postmodern movement was at its height, it was said, this is more beautiful, this is more important. Mm-hmm. That part, I'm ready to tear, let's tear down the walls mm-hmm. on that. Mm-hmm. The person who is finding the expression, even though I know Miles Davis, Lord have mercy, but I love the music. Mm-hmm. I love in spite of, or maybe because of his wounds, his male privilege, his the racism that he experienced, something came out, but the ugliness of how he treated women, I don't embrace that. So I'm somehow able to hold both of those things.
And maybe the gift of this time, particularly led by organizers in the communities, to recognize the lateral harm, people who are holding on to this kind of lateral harm in their bodies. So maybe in the next generation, we won't have this. Maybe we'll have a different way of being able to look at dance.
We were having a conversation a couple of days ago. I see we do have a couple of questions and we'll get to those, but a couple of days ago, both Ananya and Michael were expressing this sense that when they encountered your work, Jawole, that it was like, I'm not seeing anything like this. Like, this is a unique moment. And I think that sentiment is shared widely for very good reason. You are this very unique catalyzer. And yet, in that moment, you were like, yeah, but there were people doing this. The gatekeepers just weren't looking over there. And I think that there's something in what you just said that epitomizes that and actually gives me chills, right? Your capacity to fill this space of like important catalyzing and also say, but you know, there's some other sparks here that need to be attended to. And so I just appreciate that so much. And I guess I'm wondering, like, there's something in that earlier conversation that I'm like, I think I know in my gut and I know what I'm perceiving when I'm seeing your work, but what is the it, Ananya, that you perceived? And then if there's anything else about where else these seeds are actually blossoming that we haven't conditioned ourselves to notice.
You know, I felt I was so moved by the intelligence inside the choreography, like the way in which she would take things and turn them from the inside, the way in which this mosaic was created, all these different things, you know, like hand singing song, all these on my mother's hand. There was this notion of the hands, the beautiful hands of that kind of soft care. And then there was this notion of self-pleasuring. And then there was all the handshakes that were part of the Black Arts movement. So this ability to take just this one gesture and pull together from many different, it taught me that I never have to be linear, you know?
No, Lori Carlos would talk about linear terror. You know, we were talking about the work that was on the West Coast, which, you know, the snobbery on the East Coast doesn't acknowledge a lot of the work that was happening in the South and in the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And what I was influenced by, besides Ndizaki Shange, was there was a company called Wajumbe, and it was the first time I saw what we would call dancers from the African continent, but not in the traditional form. It was the way she was working with the movement. I was like, whoa! And Halifu Osamari had a studio called Everybody's. And that's when the first time I went, I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's this word of multicultural. It's everybody's. And I started seeing these ways that growing up in Kansas City, particularly, which was Black and white, you know, that's it. There was no more complexity at that time. And I started to see these ways that women were bringing voice forward and the ways that people were bringing culture forward, you know, Oakland, you know, with the Black Panther Party. So there were so many things on the West Coast and influences that were really strong. My family was living in the Bay Area at the time, so I was spending a lot of time out there. There were such strong influences, probably around the cultural, political part of myself, that I think the East Coast doesn't acknowledge. It just acknowledges itself. Basically.
I understand that being in the Midwest, it's really either you're on the East Coast or nowhere else.
And even within the East Coast, the very specific places we're usually talking about when we reference the East Coast. So
I see this question from Boomy. Hi, Boomy. She went to Florida State, so it's so nice.
Boomy asked, what advice would you offer to young emerging choreographers to survive or thrive, both within this time of loss and transition in the performing arts and after?
I would say that there's an unnecessary pressure to be ultra innovative. Let that go, because it's not on tap. I think when we try to problem solve within personal situations, we come up with, we find work, we end up creating work that is actually touching for the heart. And that's what is needed. If we need work with heart right now, and that's actually in personal problem solving. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that I had to make a decision when I was trying to decide on forming a company, and I was like, I'll never be successful at this. How, Black women, I don't come from money. How is this going to work? And I started to realize I became very interested in what we call outsider or visionary artists. And I started researching them. That became the basis of Praise House. And I realized they weren't doing it to be in a museum. They did it because they had to do it. They were expressing themselves because they had to. And it was the drive of, I have to do this. So Minnie Evans, who we were inspired by for the work Praise House, the vision came to her, draw or die. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was like, I have to do this. And I would say to young people, if you have to do it, you have to do it. And let go of, like, if you have to do it in your living room for 10 people, that's where it exists. Maybe you'll have a larger stage. I was not thinking I would, I let go of like, okay, forget success. I have to do this.
There's also a question from Hunter Valentine. Would both companies ever consider co-collaboration?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Jawole works so well. And I mean, when I would sit in the rehearsal room, I was very pregnant, and I would sit in the rehearsal room toward the end, and I was writing. And my stomach would roll from one side to another. But I just would, wow, if I could just do that, it was so amazing. I would do that in my head, all the movements, they were so exciting. There's one section in that same, on my black hand side, where the dancers come forward, like this, and then they go into this really fast movement that I dreamed.
I heard about this.
I would love to. I mean, that's not really the question. The question of co-collaboration is yes, but I would love in one life to do some of the choreographies Jawole Zollar has created.
Oh, well, we can make that happen.
But I will also say Jawole Zollar made a piece, Walking with Pearl, where someone has to stand on one leg for like 20 minutes or something. That it's a very long balance. I'm sure I cannot do that. So,
what piece? I don't know.
Somebody standing on one leg for a long time, Jawole.
It was likely Nora standing on one leg for a long time because she had that kind of capacity and balance.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Swati.
No, go ahead, Deb.
No, you.
This is a bad thing about these media. I just got so excited at the possibility of a collaboration between you, and I started thinking about futuring also, the way you use that word future, Jawole, and then I noticed that there's a question about that from C. Ross. What draws you to hope, to future as a verb, to developing a vision? Certainly an idea of a collaboration between your two companies gives me a lot of joy and hope.
Nora Chip-Almiri was the first person that I heard use the term futuring. And when she said it, I was like, yes, yes. Again, what else you gonna do? What else you gonna do? You gotta. Again, I think of my father, and I really, when my father would tell us the story when we were kids, it was like, yeah. But he really did walk 5 miles to school every day with so poor that it was cardboard in his shoes. he worked overnight in a pharmacy in order to be able to afford food for him, to go to school. So how can I not, if those are the stories, and we all have those stories, how can you not future? You have to. You have to. It's an imperative.
Yeah, and a methodology. I want to share a quick story of how I feel I have been so inspired into a practice of hope by the Native sisters I have developed relationships with in Minnesota. And I see the way Sharon Day, important Anishinaabe leader, does water walks, walking for days, tracing the line of the rivers to draw attention to the way in which we are destroying the waters of this beautiful land. And she does it, in the cold. She walks for hours, for days, and actually months on end. I see how Janice Bad Moccasin, an incredible healer, works with horses, works with the daily practice of bringing in good energy. I feel like I have to commit to this methodology unflinchingly. And I also remember, one time we were collaborating with some important organizers about environmental injustice. And I just was feeling hopeless. I was like, my goodness, the world is fallen. Everything is broken. How can we possibly make dance? And Cecilia Martinez, who was an important Native collaborator, invited me to go to the one of the largest powwows here. And I saw, I went and saw, and it was a flowing in and out. It was great energy. And then she said to me in the middle, she pulled me aside and she said, you see, we lost everything and we are still going on. What does that say to you? For me, it was like, all right, I never could doubt the urgency of hoping every day.
And that doesn't mean I don't live in hopeless moments. It is a practice, Ananya, because, there's times where, there's a dent in my couch during this pandemic that I just couldn't get off the couch. My commute was from my bed to the couch. And the practice of it, so reading things and taking in, I had to make myself, hope, because it was feeling hopeless. I think in that, when those events happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, when all of that happened, all kind of right together, I don't know that I could. I was immobilized with frozen terror and fear, and it's friends, it's family, it's support, it's starting to just the practice of if I honor my ancestors, I've got to get up off this couch. I've got to find a way to get through this.
It's so fascinating to me. This I just have this deeply felt sense of the reality of moments of hopelessness that you named, Jawole, but then also this sort of the luxury of staying there, right? That there's that there's instead this commitment to a larger trajectory that it seems that hope maybe springs from, and that seems perhaps embedded in this question here, that maybe this can be a closing thought. But Brooklyn asks, I'm curious about using the body as a container for larger than life processes like ancestral healing. How can we use our bodies and movement as mechanisms for reconciliation in our current climate?
Yeah.
I think so much of the research is telling us that the body holds memory, the body holds capacity for healing as well. I know personally that ritual practice is important. Now, I say that with care because in my cultural context, ritual practice was also stolen, abducted by hierarchized religion and deployed to further, marginalize people. So I don't mean that kind of ritual. I mean a pathway, an intentional connection to spirit and to ground, to water, to fire, to air, things that are part of our cosmos. And I have really begun to learn more and more of it from my BIPOC community here.
Mm-hmm. I was on my phone looking up this quote from a poet, Jericho Brown, on hope, and I heard it on the on a podcast the other day, and I had to just. But he says hope is the opposite of desperation. It's not as comfortable as certainty, and it's much more certain than longing. It is always accompanied by the imagination, the will to see what our physical environment seems to deem impossible. Only the creative mind can make use of hope. Only a creative people can wield it. So our creativity, that's the end of the quote, but our creativity is at the center of where we find this, our bodies as container, how we find hope, how we find this. It is our creativity. That is what I lean back into, how big or how small it is. Because some days, I remember there was one during Dance USA, they asked me to moderate. And at that time I said, I don't know what you're going to get. My mental state is day to day, hour by hour, minute by minute. So if you're willing for me to show up as who I might show up, then I can be there. I've stabilized since that time, but I think there's a truth. If we can find the creative truth of our states of being and allow that to be the impetus from where we create, that is the center of hope.
Jawole, I'm so reminded of this one quote that I love. It's again by June Jordan. So this is her speaking in 1978, commemorating the protests of 40,000 South African women and children against the Dompas laws. And she says, and who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains, and if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for.
I can't thank you both enough for this moment of sharing and bringing, bringing past, present, and future into this moment, and also for the ways that you do that in your work far beyond this hour and 20 minutes or so that we've been in conversation. I'm just so grateful for your modeling and the way that you help me know. The way that you help me know. I think that's the end of the sentence. Thank you so much.
I don't have much more to add. I'm filled with feelings that don't have words. So thank you for that. I feel very full, and gosh, I can't wait to see you both perform again in person. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Love you, Jawole.
Love you, Ananya. Deborah, Swati, so nice to be in your presence, all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for inviting us.
Oh my God. What an amazing evening. Thank you. Thank you so much, all four of you, for powerful artists, thinkers, and doers. So many insights and discoveries for our audience tonight. The two things that I'm remembering most of all, Jawole, thank you for reminding us it's not enough for only some folks in a marginalized community to succeed, and Ananya for prompting all of us to, as you said, make work to inaugurate the new world that is ready to be born. Thank you so much for that. Deep gratitude to Swati, Deborah, Jawole, and Ananya. A reminder to our audience that this event is the latest in the Fine Arts Center's commitment to connecting our audience to diverse voices and different perspectives through performance, exhibition, and education. More than ever, we rely on donors to do this work, so please, again, consider making a gift if you're able at fineartscenter.com/giving. Otherwise, stay safe. Please remember to vote, and good night, everyone.
Thank you.